Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Looks good, Mike.
All right. We'll go ahead and just kind of play this slideshow. All right. I'm going to repeat some things that I said on January 8th in the presentation, but I'm going to expand on all the options and various challenges that we have relative to what I spoke to at the conference before. But some of this stuff really bears repeating, and maybe folks that are attending this evening did not have the benefit of attending on January 8th. Again, this is a very telling slide about the requirements of the Middle Rio Grande delivery obligations associated with the Rio Grande Compact that was finalized in 1938. And the compact was negotiated on the basis of sort of status quo situation that the hydrologists and all the other three state agencies and the United States had studied the Rio Grande area for years. The Embudo gauge was one of the original river monitoring gauges ever installed in the Western United States, or maybe the United States as a whole. But it was done so on the basis of trying to collect data for understanding the hydrology and also taking surveys of the actual uses in Colorado in the San Luis Valley, as well as in the Middle Valley, and determining to the evapotranspiration rates of the river itself and various other things that they factored into developing this graphic. It was based on the index gauge at Otoe, which is it's on the old bridge to Los Alamos from Poake. If you ever drive up to Los Alamos there and you look downstream, you'll see an old bridge, and connected to it is the gauging information that determines how much water is flowing by the Otoe gauge. And then there are several adjustments that are made. They subtract out any San Juan Chama, which is the imported water into New Mexico, that I'll speak to just a little bit later, and any other adjustments that the compact allows for. And then once that index is determined, the relationship of this graphic shows whatever flows at the Otoe gauge. There's an annual delivery requirement, and you notice the turquoise wedge. Well, it starts as a wedge and then it flattens off right around the million acre foot range. Determines the water available to be depleted between the Otoe gauge and the Elephant Butte Reservoir, which includes evaporation of the reservoir as well. And that's 405,000 acre feet is the maximum allowable depletion for New Mexico, no matter how much flows by the Otoe gauge. So you can see almost a 50-50 relationship for a while until you get up into about the 500,000 mark there on the bottom axis. And then it starts to diverge away into more and more delivery requirement to Elephant Butte and the orange wedge than what is allowed to be depleted in New Mexico. And oddly enough, you get into those higher flow ranges, it makes it a much more difficult delivery obligation for New Mexico for a lot of reasons, and I'll talk in more detail about that later. So this really defines several components, Article 6, 7, and 8 of the Rio Grande Compact, and also determines what we can do with the Lotto gauge if we either get behind on the delivery requirement or we get ahead. Did I say gauge? I meant El Lotto Dam. As far as since El Lotto is a post-compact reservoir, even though it was started construction before the compact was ratified, it was still considered a post-compact reservoir, which means it has to be in compliance with the Articles 6, 7, and 8 of the Rio Grande Compact. So with that, and I showed this last time too, this is kind of a rough percentage graphic, pie chart of the depletions that we experience in the Middle Valley. And, people argue around the edges on this particular thing, but, the crop and the natural are, for all intents and purposes, pretty close in what happens here as we divert water out of the Rio Grande at the 4 diversion locations. We spread it out into the valley and the old floodplain of the Rio Grande, and the crops that are growing in this region deplete about 35% of the ODE of that 405,000 or whatever we have available to us that we divert. And the elegant system that was designed is primarily gravity flow. We only have 2 pumps in the whole system. We've added a brand new one actually, so we have 3. But it's all a gravity flow operation. The Rio Grande Conservancy District, when it was authorized by the Conservancy Act in 1923, went through an extensive study and review of the area. And it's an interesting read if you ever want to get a hold of the official plan of the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. It really delves into the details of the water use of the times and the anticipated project that would be constructed in order to optimize what was considered to be the planned amount of agriculture in the valley under the compact. Allowable under the compact was roughly about 123,000 acres, was estimated to be the build out, if you will, under the study that the compact underwent and what the district undertook as well. So that was sort of baked into the compact numbers at that time. They also took into account the natural depletions associated with the river channel back then, but it was nothing what it is now. It was a much more a wider, more braided floodplain, and there was not a whole lot of vegetation growing. I've seen some pictures where it was almost denuded of vegetation for a variety of reasons. People cut down trees for firewood, and there was grazing and various things going on in the river basin. In the bottom, the riparian zone of the river was a lot of human activities in that time. And then the district built essentially tried to maintain a 600 to 900 foot wide channel with a levee system and Kellner jetty jacks and various things like that. And they also did an extensive drainage system because the agricultural lands were pretty subbed out. A lot of swampy lands. We have a picture in the district office that's at Rio Grande and I-40 area that was a complete swamp before they actually built the drain system and reclaimed the lands for agriculture and human development in general. So the elegant nature of the system is you divert the water, they use it on the crops, it infiltrates into the system or evaporates off the soil and in the ET of all the vegetation, but a good majority of it gets into the drains and finds its way to the next diversion site or back to the river, whatever the case may be. So it was designed to fully capitalize on this relationship here in order to keep things in balance going forward. Then, as time went on, there was the drought of the 50s. New Mexico got into a serious deficit then. I think they were even in violation of the compact for a few years in that time period, and then just managed to operate and dig their way out of it, and had to do a lot with the flood control acts of 1948 and 50, when the Bureau of Reclamation came in and rehabilitated the district. They were broke. The district was broke, couldn't, because of the war and the floods and the subbed out, some of the subbed out areas that needed rehabilitation because of a lack of maintenance and because of, of the district's financial situation. The Bureau of Reclamation came in and bailed out the district financially as well as structurally, and they rebuilt the area. They also built the low flow conveyance channel in order to optimize deliveries down in the lower reach near Socorro and all the way down to Elephant Butte. And that helped New Mexico start to recover from their deficit, but they never fully did. They were in and out of different degrees of deficit up until the spill at Elephant Butte in 1985. And when that occurs under the rules of the compact, all debits and credits are wiped out by Colorado and New Mexico. So you could imagine there was quite a celebration when that occurred by Colorado and New Mexico. And I've heard stories about that, tequila bottles rolling down the spillway at Elephant Butte and, other fun things like that. But but since then, New Mexico did a really decent job of staying in compliance with the compact. A few deficit years here and there, but for the most part, you can see from 1998 up through about, let's say 2013, we were kind of following the same pattern that we did since 1985. We came out of probably the wettest period that the Middle Rio Grande has experienced in the 80s and 90s, maybe for 1,000 years, I don't know, but during that period, we were able to make deliveries, and we suffered some other problems with a continually full Elephant Butte. It caused a lot of channelization issues in that area because of the high reservoir, a lot of sediment plugging, a lot of problems, constantly fighting the levees in that reach, concerns about the loss of infrastructure, et cetera, because of the high reservoir. But then things turned around, the reservoir dropped. Then we had other problems with sedimentation and serious, channel problems down in that Santa Casia reach. But you can see we've drifted consistently in the deficit arena here, since 2013 for sure, and now find ourselves somewhere around 130,000 acre feet in a cumulative deficit under the compact. This area that I've been speaking to, kind of in the below, San Antonio, New Mexico, Highway 380 or so south, a very confined river channel because of a levee and the low flow conveyance channel. But this is the outfall area. They call it River Mile 60. It's below Bosque del Apache. I can't remember how many miles, but you can see this really big sort of wetland area. This is, if you see the kind of linear channel in the middle of the page, and it kind of parallels the river, the less linear river channel. And you can see a number 61 and 60 there in the lower left-hand corner. This is what they call the low flow conveyance outfall area. And right now it's really not functioning. Water just kind of spills all over the place and kind of builds this reservoir area where there's a high loss reach, high loss area. And the Interstate Stream Commission has spent a lot of money, as well as reclamation, in kind of channelizing the old floodplain delta that built up when the reservoir was high. They had to rechannelize and reconnect the river channel to the lake right now, down to the Narrows, where the water can more or less free flow down to the lake and make our deliveries. This area needs to be seriously reviewed. There's a lot of discussion going on right now with reclamation and in the state and the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District about doing some some interim things to make this function better. One in particular would be to really analyze the ability to put the low flow conveyance channel back into operation and do it more conjunctively with what you want to accomplish with habitat preservation in the main channel of the Rio Grande. Before it was pretty much dried up. The way they operated the low flow is truly as a low flow, where they would take the full flow of the river, put it in the low flow conveyance channel, aside from what was being diverted for irrigation, and send it down to Elephant Butte, and that was not ecologically sound really for that riverine system in that reach. But I think now we're in a position where we could really do a very conjunctive use strategy with that system. And I'll talk more about that in a sec, but well, here we are. Solutions and opportunities, and that's one of them that is really important for us to look at. And there is an extensive effort ongoing, and we're seeking, from every possible angle to help support reclamation and their funding needs, to begin, a more active channel maintenance project program. To be fair to reclamation, they've got they've had a lot of distractions, if you want to put it in those terms, with the biological opinion requirements since 2003 or even before that, to address a lot of that. So a lot of their operating resources have gone in that direction. They still have a pretty robust river maintenance program, but they're responsible for many river miles all the way up to Velarde, New Mexico, and all the way through the system. And they've done what they can do, and they've done some realignment work recently, and it's had moderate success. And there's more that we want to do, and so the state and hopefully all three states are supportive of reclamation's efforts, and that addresses the third bullet. Really is address the high loss Santa Casia reach and consider some sort of conjunctive operational strategy of getting what I would call now a high flow conveyance channel, where you optimize the higher flows when they're available, and you do it in a way that is still environmentally sensitive for the endangered species plans in the river channel itself, and try to figure out the best way to combine the channels together at a key location somewhere south of maybe the San Marshall Bridge or somewhere in that area, and have a single channel system in that area that we just looked at. I'll just go right back up to it again, just to put the channels together and have a single channel system that also makes very good use of this. We have willow flycatcher habitat issues with the aging of the delta habitat. This area could be redone, and we can irrigate these areas to make it really good willow flycatcher habitat and possibly minnow refugia areas, etc. So there's a lot of options there. These other things is really, we got to scale our irrigation diversions kind of on an annual operating basis, and it's been done on a recurring basis, because the Conservancy Act and the district kind of operate on as a large acequia, if you will. It's a shared shortage situation, with the exception of the prior and paramount water rights of the Pueblos. All other water users share in the shortages, and we essentially kind of scale the operations to the available water supply, and have done that for decades. But now, in more recent times, we've actually been taking the compact delivery as a almost an equal priority, if you will. I think the some of my irrigator constituents that I serve in my previous job would argue with me a little bit about that, but nonetheless, we see three kind of equal priorities that we're trying to manage for in the Middle Rio Grande. And now with my state hat on, I have more responsibilities to support the state's actions and needs in there. So really, the idea would be that you kind of, and I'll tell you what the board of directors approved for the operating plan in January is just that, is we're going to, particularly in the early startup period of the runoff, is we want to make sure that half or better of the flows in the Rio Grande are remaining in the river and heading down to Elephant Butte until the runoff gets going. And then, of course, a higher percentage will be able to flow through. And hopefully, under that scenario, you begin to move towards a more balanced operation. And of course, one of the main factors for making compact deliveries is the summer monsoon period. And we were quite disappointed that we didn't see better deliveries this last monsoon period, where we had, 10 inches of rain or whatever you want to call it in the Socorro area. And some showed up down at Elephant Butte, but it just shut off right in the early parts of September, and it really dried out. And ordinarily a good monsoon will go into September or early October, back when we used to see those on a more recurring basis. So monsoons really help a lot in the average delivery, but we've seen less of monsoon that we can rely upon for sure. And so that's been a contributing factor to the accumulation of debit. But there's a couple things that we can do in that regard, and that, so managing the scale of your irrigation diversions, the board is taking actions in that. They cut the irrigation season short by 2 months last year. That really didn't work too well for some of our cropping patterns. So this year we're doing it a little differently, or the board is districts going to do a little differently, and that is they're going to allow for about half the river to be diverted and half of it has to move forward. So that's some actions that are being taken. And then dynamic fellowing, using currently, we're seeking state funds, and there could be federal dollars to bear. There already is for environmental leasing. So we're going to kind of optimize those two funding opportunities that are looking probable as we look at the budget for the state right now. And then we got to figure out how to make that a recurring process that's not always going to be on the back of the taxpayer. There has to be some sort of a leasing program that starts to build a fund or something that irrigation district can use to optimize the available water supply and allow it to be dynamic in that context. And then I already talked about the Santa Casa Reach. We're in the throes of dam safety project for Alvaro. The district has to pay 15% of that, but they got a pretty good repayment schedule that they can live with. But it's going to be $150 million deal to reface the plate, the steel plate, still facing of the dam, and then also replace the spillway. But it's going to be out of commission for a couple of years. So that's the best time right now is to put this dynamic fallowing program in place. Put as many acres on the sidelines voluntarily as we possibly can, and continue to make deliveries down to Elephant Butte, and also continue to keep a reasonable flow in the river for ESA purposes. And that's the third prong on the fork is we gotta continue to meet our ESA obligations. Otherwise, we'll be probably back in reconsultation with the service and under possible lawsuit as well. As we utilize new federal funding to that's becoming available on a massive scale, not seen in a generation, we want to utilize that fund to expand measuring, water conservation, environmental leasing, and capture and reuse of stormwater. Also, I mentioned earlier, the leasing program that needs to be more robust. We're encouraging farm to farm and farm to environment kind of leasing programs. So those are short-term actions, and there's a lot in there. I won't get into the heavy details, but those are things that we're already doing and have been doing for quite some time. And then the longer term stuff is what we're really talking about probably in this evening's sort of breakout process is the, how do we rethink our agricultural system that is scaled to a new normal, if you will, if there's such a thing. We've always experienced erratic and variable runoffs and water supplies, and we know how to deal with that, but it's going to become more so erratic and more so arid based on the studies that everybody has gotten their arms around now. So rescaling our agricultural system with different cropping patterns, smaller acreage footprints, and then good support, transitional support to the producers, because I'm a firm believer that agricultural production is going to change at some point, where there'll be higher valued crops that locally that will be locally produced, that will really sustain the agricultural environment and be a good food secure setting here as the wheels come off, maybe in the California basins over there. We're still going to need to grow food to feed ourselves, and some sort of model to preserve that and help producers move in that direction will really be a good thing for the Department of Ag and the state agricultural support systems to move in that direction, improve watersheds and soils at the basin level and farm scales in order for the soils to be healthier, retain more moisture when it is available, and produce a good crop with a better soil matrix, and kind of move away from the traditional agricultural process of tilling and fertilization, et cetera. And then manage conjunctive use strategies through intensive groundwater administration procedures that would allow for some certain amount of groundwater to maintain a crop when the surface water is less available, but do it in a way that's conjunctive and not mining the groundwater, but do it responsibly and well administered. And then stormwater capture, treatment, and use strategies. We're doing some of that already in the Bernalillo and Sandoval counties, working with the flood control agencies. We're able to take on some of that water that's been treated under the, I forget what they call the system they got to work under for the water treatment requirements. And then a big one really is optimizing the current reservoir systems with new authorities. Similar to what has occurred under the WRDA 2020 bill, where Abiquiu Dam now has a new authority to store native Rio Grande. We're going through some bureaucratic hurdles with the Corps right now to kind of get that in play, but that's a move in the right direction to give us more flexibility in the system. And then take a look at Cochiti and maybe some other of the tributary dams that could be used in that manner as well. And if you do it right, you can optimize deliveries down to Elephant Butte if you store water, Rio Grande project water higher in the system, and optimize the deliveries during low loss periods. We've done that already with El Vado. If you had more flexibility in the system, you could probably optimize your winter deliveries down to Elephant Butte more effectively. And then settle Middle Rio Grande Pueblo's water rights claims and give them more flexibility to use their resources more effectively. And if Cochiti Reservoir was in play for them to use it right at the top of the system, that would be more beneficial for them as well. So those are things to throw out for food for thought as we go into our breakouts and determine exactly what other ideas folks might have along that line. So that's all I have. I don't know if there's a Q&A component to this, Bob, but I certainly am available to stand for questions.
Why don't we do a minute or two of questions and then go into the breakout rooms?
Okay.
Does anybody want to unmute themselves and ask?
This is Dagmar. I'd like to ask a question of Mike. Hi, Mike. Can you talk about the degree to which the state has the authority to require releases from reservoirs to get down to Elephant Butte in the situation of a delivery crisis on the compact?
That hasn't been tested yet. I think the state engineer was discussing what he called an order last year. And I don't know. I think with the kind of the rub between the Conservancy Act and state water law, I think would come into play a little bit. And as you know, Reclamation holds a storage permit at El Guado, and so there's complexities to that haven't been tested. And
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I asked the question.
and so I wouldn't want to speculate. I have a different hat on now, so I don't want to put my foot in my mouth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting that it's always been so far that entities who store water have voluntarily released it. So that's never been tested. And I think it's an interesting legal question.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right.
We got a hand raised from a Robert Coburn.
Yeah, and I appreciate you letting me in on this. I'm just a landowner down south, and so I'm not a big one either. I'm just a small landowner. But my question for Mike, and I think Mike might have this answer, is the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District charges me a bunch of money every year for the water we use. And what I'm wondering is, does the Rio Grande Conservancy District not have enough money? Because it sounds like we're going out wanting federal funds to do some of the projects we have. So, I mean, are we not paying our bills with the Conservancy District? Do we need more money? Are we going to have to increase that rate? Or what's the deal with money that we need to go to the feds to get more money for this?
Well, I do know a lot about the budget and everything with the district. We're in pretty good balance with our operational expenses, and we do have somewhere around $1.5 to $2 million a year to leverage into federal projects, but it takes $18+ million of the 20 some odd million annual budget just to run this railroad. And I inherited a system that had a lot of deferred maintenance, and so we've been catching up on that and using our funds for that kind of stuff. And let me just correct you. You pay for the system that delivers you water. You're not paying for the water. That's kind of that's a nuance that's important.
I understand that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate that qualification.
Yeah.
Again, it seems like, we and again, I don't think it's exorbitant, but a lot of times they'll just cut the water off, and unless you know the ditch writer, you may not get water one year or another. So it's kind of funny how that works.
Well, we're trying to hone in on a more equitable and customer service based what we call irrigation system operator approach, and we've turned the corner quite a bit on that, but like you said, the ditch writers are kind of run their own little kingdoms, and that was always been kind of an issue for us, and we're getting our arms around that, or the district is now. And one of my projects when I was there to address that concern, but what we're finding is the system that we ran last year really illustrated that we can divert less water and still provide a high level of service. And, you know, yourself and others can argue a little around the edges about whether you personally got the best service possible or not. But the idea is to run our system, you know, in a scheduled and tightly managed way so that we're not having to divert as much water, and in some cases leaving more up at Alvaro or leaving more in the river to get down to Elephant Butte. So that's the operational game plan that we've implemented, and we'll continue to kind of fine tune that as we go forward in the future.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate you taking the time for that.
We've got 3 hands up. Norm Gom, Mike Marcus, and Carl Braithwaite. And let's try to be a little brief because we've been running a little over time. Norm.
Mike, I just wondered if you would share your thoughts about initiating active administration of diversions in the Middle Rio Grande, all diversions.
Yeah, all diversions, and you even kind of hinting on domestic wells and the like. You know, that's an interesting proposition, because I think it would take a pretty good effort, but I think there is the possibility of I consider the Middle Valley somewhat akin to an A-worm type of operation because of the shared shortage method. So it may not be too difficult for the state engineer to vest additional authorities into the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District to start managing groundwater. We've taken positions on people that have, either stopped irrigating and decided to drill a well or whatever, and because we consider the shallow groundwater as part of district water, because the return flows are important to the district, and you start pumping those and it causes a different balancing problem with that. So yeah, I think there is an answer there, and I think the district could be considered a logical partner and enforcement arm of the state engineer's office if they were vested and had the resources to do something like that. And I think it would be important to do that. And I talked about conjunctive use for farm operations. People are going the expensive route right now of buying, $12,000 to $18,000 an acre foot water right, pre-1907 right, and putting them in a well just because they're worried they're not going to be able to make a crop. And but that's an expensive undertaking, and it's there's not that many remaining pre-1907s really, and it's jacking up the price, and Rio Rancho's in the mix to try to get more and more of those as well for their offset requirements. But I think the answer really, Norm, is a regional strategy with all of the water users at the table that come up with a logical shortage sharing process at the M&I, as well as the community levels, at the mutual domestic water user levels, that everybody kind of ebbs and flows with the available water supplies and reduces demands over the long term. So I think that is where the answer lies.
Okay, Mike Marcus.
Hi, Mike. I had a quick question. On your second slide, you had the depletions, and I was wondering, groundwater and natural and the crops. I was wondering where M&I shows up.
It's mixed into that 25% groundwater.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and Carl Braithwaite.
Yes, Mike, the last session of this advocacy group, we looked at restructuring the arrangements for, water issues in the state. Do you see that there's enough energy to do that kind of significant change? Do you think the odds are at all favorable to getting better integration of the institutions?
Well, you're asking me to put my new hat on, I guess, right now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think the appetite is there. I think we're going to undertake a process through the 50-year water plan to come up with some logical recommendations. It's going to be a little incremental, but what we want to do is come up with some solid recommendations for the 60-day session for people to start grappling with changes that need to be made to turn us into a 21st century operation, so to speak, as relative to the 20th century laws and infrastructure that we've grown accustomed to utilizing for our water resources management strategy. So it's time to really take a close look at it. I don't disagree with that.
Thank you.